The vegetated roofs, how they're officially defined is thin layers of engineered soil and vegetation constructed on top of a conventional flat or sloped roof. And we'll talk about the degree of slope that is acceptable and to still consider a vegetated roof. So there are three different types of vegetated roofs. There are intensive, semi-intensive, and extensive roofs. And basically the difference here is they have different applications. So for intensive roofs, there's a thicker growth media. It allows for additional plants like shrubs and trees. And intensive roofs also, because there's a deeper growth media, they allow for folks to get out on the roofs, and so you'll see like rooftop patios and things like that that are part of intensive roofs because there's more structure that is supporting the roof. Whereas extensive roofs there's just less growth media, and the types of vegetation are things like sedums and ground covers, and the structural support does not allow for human access to the roof, but still has great visual benefits from the building for folks that are using the building. So intensive roofs, just because they have more growth media, can be more expensive. They allow the 50 to 300 pounds per square foot when wet is the weight, and so that needs to be considered when you're designing for these types of roofs, for intensive roofs, versus extensive roofs have lighter weight structures that support them, and they 10 to 35 pounds per square foot when wet. And so there's quite a big difference in just the sheer weight of extensive roofs versus intensive roofs. And the intent of extensive roofs is really to maximize the total vegetated area. A slide that really shows all the various components of vegetated roofs. And so they are, engineered systems, and a lot of aspects go into the creation of these types of vegetated roofs. There are lots of benefits, and here the first slide that we show you is the benefits that are not stormwater management related, just showing you that there's a really wide list of benefits, from wildlife habitat to improved water quality, noise reduction, as well as just happier workers. And when you have access, when you're looking out your office window onto a vegetated roof versus onto, just a conventional roof, it's a lot prettier to look at. And there have been a lot of studies actually that have shown that workers that have either access to green roofs or vegetated roofs or can see them from their office space tend to have lower stress levels. They're really great for buildings such as hospitals and other things like that where there tends to be high stress, increases productivity and reduces sick days. And these things seem sort of softer and more touchy-feely, but there actually are quite a few studies out there that have shown these things to be true in buildings with vegetated roofs and linking it to happier workers, happier employees. There are a lot of economic benefits for vegetated roofs. Energy cost savings, it reduces the size of the HVAC equipment. So it's a tough life to be an HVAC system in an office building. People have very different levels of what they think of as comfortable temperature levels. And so HVAC systems in these buildings are working really, really hard. And if you've got a vegetated roof, it can really work to reduce the fluctuations of indoor temperatures throughout the day and at different locations in office space. I know for myself, I'm on the west side of our building. I mean, we bake in the summer on the west side of the building in the afternoon, and you walk to the east end of the building, they're wearing sweaters. And so vegetated roofs can really help to reduce fluctuations in indoor temperature. Also extends the roof membrane life, and that's another really good consideration when you're thinking about economic reasons for these, because vegetated roofs can tend to be a more expensive BMP than some of the other best management practices that we've talked about today. So these are some other considerations to help offset those initial costs. And they also have multiple functions, so can be used for stormwater flow control as much as they can be used for food growth. But that gets into which type of roof. Are you doing an intensive roof? And that would be an applicant or a candidate for having a rooftop garden, because people can actually get out and access it because there's enough structure to support those people. An intensive roof versus an extensive roof would not be a candidate for a rooftop garden and food growth. Really fantastic for office spaces, for industrial spaces, warehouses. A lot of those types of buildings tend to have flat roofs, so they are really good candidates for that. Intensive commercial designs can really accommodate foot traffic. That's really fantastic. These can be really good in dense urban areas and provide outdoor access and a really nice place for workers to go during their lunch breaks and other things where there may not be green space anywhere near them. And also rooftop gardens for growing food. So some of the limitations: the single-family residential roof structures, they typically require structural buttressing to support wet soil loads, and so it isn't as feasible for single-family residential homes as it is for some of these other office spaces. Steeply pitched roofs, so if you've got a 10 to 40 degree pitch on your roof, then it really does need to require additional analysis before considering a vegetated roof as an option for design. And really the best pitch is 5 to 20 degree roofs is the best. Greater than 40 degree slope is just really considered infeasible for pretty obvious reasons. If there's too much of a pitch, then it's just not going to work for a vegetated roof. So just some design considerations. We've listed 2 really good resources that we would recommend checking out. One is the Michigan LID manual. It talks about applicable snow loads and how they have to be considered in the design of these types of structures. And the Yakima LID manual, it talks about irrigation. So even on the west of the mountains where there's a whole lot more rain, these roofs are getting direct sunlight a lot, for a chunk of the year. And so irrigation, even in Seattle, I know projects where they've had to keep, the irrigation during plant establishment, they've had to keep that going because they are just, there are a lot of exposure to sunlight. So irrigation does need to be a factor here during plant establishment and potentially beyond too. And things that the Yakima LID manual talk about: drip and tube systems, as well as ensuring the system is properly winterized. So that's something that for all irrigation, whether it's on a vegetated roof or whether it's in bioretention, during plant establishment, wanting to factor in the irrigation systems and fluctuating temperatures throughout the year. A very real consideration, especially after the fire season that we just had this past year, fire protection, and avoid using flammable materials, and maintaining a stone or gravel border around the edges, and specifying fire-resistant vegetation. And there's some really great information in this Yakima Regional Low Impact Development Stormwater Design Manual.